Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Talks between the United States and Ukraine have concluded in Saudi Arabia as the nations discuss peace in the war with Russia. The Kremlin says previous talks held in the nation between the US and Russia are being analysed, while Russia wants UN intervention in said talks. Top Trump administration officials mistakenly disclosed Yemen war plans with an Atlantic journalist prior to strikes on the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. In screenshots from the group conversation, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth allegedly calls European allies freeloaders and pathetic. China has slammed what it calls US interference after President Donald Trump announced 25% tariffs on imports from countries that buy oil from Venezuela. Meanwhile, India is open to shutting tariffs on US to shield against reciprocal duties from the States. Meanwhile, China says that Canada is seriously damaging its interests in the ongoing global trade spat. It follows action from Ottawa, which launched a dispute against Beijing at the World Trade Organization. Hamas has released a video of 2 Israeli hostages held in Gaza since the 7th of October attack of 2023. The families of Elkanah Bobot and Yosef Haim Ahana have released an emotional plea in response to Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. Meanwhile, the UN has announced it will downsize international staff in Gaza as fighting intensifies in the Strip. Pre-dawn strikes have killed at least 23 people in the territory, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. At least 4 people have died, including 3 firefighters, as huge wildfires continue to rage across South Korea. Villages have been ordered to evacuate as homes and a temple are engulfed in the flames. Turkish President Erdogan has blamed the opposition party for provoking a movement of violence as protests continue for a 6th night. Mass demonstrations have taken place since Istanbul Mayor Imamoglu was arrested on corruption charges, something he denies. We start in Europe, and the Kremlin says both Russia and the US are analysing the results of their recent talks in Saudi Arabia. While details remain undisclosed, officials suggest further discussions could follow. However, no plans have been made for a call between Presidents Trump and Putin, though the Kremlin says one could be arranged if needed. This is what the US has said.
One thing in front of us that everyone is doing, and that is to secure the peace of that region, of those 2 countries, which more even than the region, the entire world. And that's the singular thing that is being worked on right now in Saudi Arabia. It is the singular thing that the president has been focused on. It is what the secretary has been working on pretty much from day one, which is, what are we in, the 9th week at this point. And dramatic changes have already occurred. Fabulous changes have occurred.
Meanwhile, tensions remain high on the battlefield. Russia claims to have intercepted 227 Ukrainian drones and hits 143 targets, while Ukraine reports downing 57 Russian drones and engaging in 140 frontline clashes. As the diplomatic process continues, US officials are set to meet with Ukrainian negotiators. And President Trump has hinted at a potential revenue sharing deal with Ukraine on critical minerals, alongside discussions on US firms investing in Ukrainian power infrastructure. The Kremlin has expressed condolences over the killing of 3 Russian journalists in Luhansk, claiming they were targeted by Ukrainian forces. A Ukrainian rocket attack killed 6 people in the Russian-occupied region, including war correspondent Alexander Ferochak from Izvesta, camera operator Andrei Panov and driver Alexander Sekeli from the Zvezda TV channel. The Moscow-appointed governor of Luhansk, Leonid Pasachink, confirmed that a 14-year-old child was also killed. Fedorchuk had recently reported from Kupiansk in Kharkiv, where Russian forces have been advancing against Ukrainian troops in recent months. Moving on, and the Palestinian co-director of the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land has been attacked by settlers and arrested by the Israeli army in the occupied West Bank. As per reports, this came after an outbreak of violence between Israeli settlers and Palestinians. Co-director Yuval Abraham said that Mr. Bilal had been beaten and taken by soldiers while in an ambulance, although this has been disputed by Israel. Without naming Mr. Bilal, the Israel Defense Forces said 3 Palestinians and an Israeli had been detained after being suspected of rock hurling at security forces. The activists said they had gone to the village to document the incident and had come under attack themselves, with settlers smashing their car windows and punching and hitting them with sticks. Staying in the region, and Hamas has released a video of 2 Israeli hostages, Elkanah Bobot and Yosef Haim Ohana, taken during the October 7th attacks at the Nova Music Festival. The video, made public yesterday, shows 2 men pleading for their return. The hostages' families confirmed their identities, with Bobot's wife and young child anxiously awaiting his safe return. The video surfaced a week after ceasefire talks between Israel and Hamas collapsed. Despite a brief calm in Gaza, fighting has resumed with airstrikes and ground troops. Israel says military pressure is the key to securing the release of the 59 remaining dead and alive hostages.
אני אסיר מספר 21.
אני אסיר מספר 22. ועד אתמול היה לי שם והיה לי זהות והיה לי תקווה. היום אני רק עוד מספר. שידעו כולם! אתה יודע כמה סבל אנחנו עוברים פה כל הזמן. אתה יודע איך זה בזמן מלחמה ואיך זה בזמן עסקה. אני לא יצאתי עוד. תסביר להם כמה קשה לי, כל יום פה קשה לי, בלי הבן שלי ובלי האישה שלי. תספר להם כמה אני סובל.
We now head to North America, and according to reports, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth accidentally shared secret US strike plans on Iran-backed terrorists in Yemen. He sent them in a group chat with top Trump administration officials. However, the chat mistakenly included a magazine editor. The officials used the public encrypted messaging app Signal to discuss these plans. Analysts said this raises serious concerns about the mishandling of national security information. Former intelligence officials said that such details should only be shared through secure government platforms. Brian Hughes, a spokesperson for the White House National Security Council, confirmed the chat's authenticity. He said officials are reviewing how an unintended number was added. Hughes also defended the discussion, calling them a sign of deep and thoughtful policy coordination. He added that the success of the Houthi operation shows there were no threats to US troops or national security. Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, revealed the leak in an article. He reported that Mike Waltz, Trump's national security advisor, mistakenly added him to the Signal chat. The group was titled Houthi PC Small Group. Let's hear what Trump and Pete Hegseth have said on the matter.
Nobody was texting war plans, and that's all I have to say about that. You're talking about a deceitful and highly discredited so-called journalist who's made a profession of peddling hoaxes time and time again.
I don't know anything about it. I'm not a big fan of The Atlantic. To me, it's a magazine that's going out of business. I think it's not much of a magazine, but I know nothing about it. You're saying that they had what?
They were using Signal to coordinate on sensitive materials and
Having to do with what? Having to do with what? What were they talking about?
with the Houthis.
The Houthis? You mean the attack on the Houthis? Well, it couldn't have been very effective because the attack was very effective. I can tell you that. I don't know anything about it. You're telling me about.
Well, staying in North America, and we have some breaking news coming in. According to Politico, US National Security Advisor Mike Waltz could be removed after adding journalist Jeffrey Goldberg to the private chat in which US strikes on the Houthis were discussed. White House officials say President Trump will make a decision soon. The chat, leaked by Atlantic, included top officials like Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Despite internal turmoil, House Speaker Mike Johnson backs Waltz, calling him exceptionally qualified. Well, joining us to discuss these latest developments is our executive editor of NewsX World, Megha Sharma. Megha, thank you very much for joining us. The revelations that we're hearing in that breaking news there, that potentially there will be action for Mike Waltz. Can you also talk us through that and what we've seen released in these alleged group chats, conversations that have been leaked by The Atlantic?
You know, it has been a massive embarrassment for the White House and for the National Security Advisor. Mind you, in that group chat that was created on a private messaging app, which was Signal, there was Pete Hegseth, who was the Defense Secretary, who was part of this group chat. There was, of course, Tulsi Gabbard, who's the Director of National Intelligence. We also had J.D. Vance, the Vice President of America, and there was this editor-in-chief of a political journal by the name of Atlantic, who was made part of this group. Now, there are sources within the White House who have been speaking to the Politico magazine, talking about how there could be stern action that could be taken against Mike Waltz, to the tune of him actually being removed from his position, not even been 100 days that he was appointed by President Trump. And he might just be removed, because what option does the President of America have? It is an embarrassing moment, and even though President Trump and after that the White House has come out and released a statement that they are with Mike Pence, they are with Mike Waltz, and they are appreciative and strongly support Mike Waltz for the Houthi attacks that had been orchestrated by America, the attacks on Houthis that were orchestrated by America in Yemen. There will have to be actions that will have to be taken, because this piece of news that has exploded, this was released about 12 to 14 hours ago, and it has made the opposition stronger in its demand for taking an action against the National Security Advisor. And this is a top secret, this was classified information, and how is it possible? And in such circumstances where the top-notch authorities, officials, secretaries who were part of this group could allow for a journalist to be part of this discussion. So questions are going to be pointed at Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor. Pete Hegseth at this point of time also released a statement. He denied completely that there was in fact a journalist who was added to this group. White House has still not made any such comment thus far. It has refused to make any comment on the questions that were posed by journalists in that press briefing yesterday, but just came out in complete and full support of Mike Waltz.
Yes, Megha, also documented in the screenshots of this alleged conversation is comments about Europe. Allegedly, Pete Hegseth has made these comments, calling European allies pathetic, also calling them freeloaders. How might this impact US-EU relations, given the tension we've seen over the Russia-Ukraine war and also the ongoing tariff disputes?
Well, the US-European relations are already strained. We already saw in the last several weeks there have been threats that have been issued by the Trump administration for levying huge tariffs, whether it is Italy or Spain or Germany and France. They have all been, they have faced a beating from the reciprocal tariffs that Trump has been threatening to impose upon Europe. Not just that, because of how Europe perceives United States of America in an apparent support to Russia, where there have been ceasefire talks that have been taking place in Saudi Arabia, whether initially it was with the United States and Ukraine or later on with Russia and the United States officials. It seems as if, according to Europe, that United States of America is more in support of Russia and wanting to hold this ceasefire at any cost, even if it were to appease President Putin of Russia. There has been also chatter about how there needs to be more defense in terms of the $63 billion that had been announced by the European Union commissioner, who said that these funds need to be brought together, and Europe needs to stand together, and it should not rely on the United States of America in protecting its territories or protecting Ukraine as well. So that goes on to show that the ties between US and Europe have significantly strained. Now, whether this chat that has been released and is doing the rounds is really going to actually further worsen the Europe and US relationship, it may not. I think the damage has already been done, whether it is about the US tariff plan or, for that matter, US and Trump administration particularly seemingly supporting Vladimir Putin. But I think the damage is going to be more on the national security advisor. The damage is going to be more on the Trump administration. The fact that there has been huge support that has been given to Mike Waltz, the fact that there have been the Houthi attacks that were a massive success under the Trump administration. Trump wants to take complete credit for it, because before Trump was actually elected as the president of America, there was the Biden administration. It did really nothing against the Houthis when a number of those strikes from the Houthis hit American and British vessels in the sea, in the Gulf of Aden. So here, if this anomaly, this problem comes that there was this secret classified information that was leaked inadvertently, is a huge embarrassment for the defense secretary. It is a huge embarrassment for the national security advisor, and then it is the onus is on the Trump administration, and particularly President Trump, because the opposition will be asking Trump, questioning Trump, making those tough questions and asking him, what exactly have you done if your national security advisor is so lax in causing a blunder and an embarrassment that is making him a laughing stock across the globe.
Absolutely, Megha Sharma, thank you very much for joining us on that. We will, of course, be across all of the fallout from this situation. The Democrats, of course, ready to respond as well, and we will be here to bring you all of those updates. But we do move on. And China has accused the United States of interfering in Venezuela's internal affairs. This follows President Donald Trump's announcement of a 25% tariff on imports from countries that buy oil and gas from Venezuela. Trump stated that the new levy, which will take effect on April the 2nd, applies to all goods entering the US from countries purchasing Venezuelan oil. China is the largest importer of Venezuelan oil, with other buyers including India, Spain and even the United States. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Guo Jiakun has called on the US to stop interfering and to lift the illegal unilateral sanctions on Venezuela. In South Korea, acting President Han has commented on the global impact of President Trump's inauguration, highlighting the growing US-China rivalry and the major shifts in geopolitics and the economic order. He pledged to ensure stable governance and protect South Korea's national interest amid the ongoing trade war. Let's hear what Guo Jiakun had to say.
美国长期滥用非法单边制裁和所谓长臂管辖，粗暴干涉其他国家内政，中方对此坚决反对。我们呼吁美方停止干涉委内瑞拉内政，废除对委内瑞拉的非法单边制裁，多做有利于委内瑞拉和其他国家和平、稳定发展的事。贸易战、关税战没有赢家，加征关税只会让美国企业和消费者承受更大的损失。
Well, staying with tariffs, and in a Reuters exclusive, sources say that India is seeking relief from US reciprocal tariffs in exchange for cutting duties on American imports. India is open to reducing tariffs to as low as 0 on 55% of US imports, which currently face duties ranging from 5% to 30%. New Delhi estimates a $66 billion hit to its exports due to the tariff measures. In response, it is willing to lower duties on over half of US imports worth $23 billion. The discussions come as the Assistant US Trade Representative for South and Central Asia, Brendan Lynch, arrives in India for key trade talks. Joining us to discuss these latest developments once again is our executive editor, Megha Sharma. We have a lot of updates there in relation to the ongoing trade spat, but let's start with India and these calls to potentially put off some tariffs to ease the pressure on US exports. What more have you got on that for us?
Yes, it's interesting to note that the date April 2nd is coming closer. That's the date that has been announced by President Trump, that there are going to be tariffs, reciprocal tariffs that are going to be imposed on countries which include India as well. It's also interesting to note that right ahead of this imposition of tariffs, there has been the arrival of the Assistant US Trade Representative Brendan Lynch, who is over here. He's arrived over here in India. He's in Delhi and he is going to continue to stay over here up until 29th of March. And if reports are to be believed, there has been a Reuters report that goes on to say that India is willing to cut the tariffs up to 55% of the US imports. It goes on to say the kind of negotiations India is willing to have with the Americans in a bid to stop the Trump administration to impose the reciprocal tariffs, because the math is very simple. If India decides to cut tariffs on US products that are imported into India, which would cost India about $23 billion US dollars. In contrast, if Trump administration were to impose the reciprocal tariffs on India, it would amount to the exchequer bleeding about $66 billion US dollars. So that clearly states how India at this point of time is wanting to safeguard its interests. And of course, balance of trade is something that the Trump administration has been harping upon between India and United States of America. And it only is logical that, when we see that there seems to be a positive effort on the sides of the American administration as well, because when you see the Assistant US Trade Representative arriving in India, he's going to be here in 4 days. He's coming alongside with the officials from the US Trade Department as well. So these negotiations and the official statement that has come from the US Embassy yesterday was that these the conversations that will revolve around the officials from the Indian Commerce Ministry as well as the US Trade Department is going to be about negotiations on trade. Mind you, just a month ago, Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India had travelled to Washington DC and he had met President Trump. And right after his return, the big announcement that was made was that the 150% tariff that India imposed on the bourbon whiskey that was imported into India from the United States of America, that import would be reduced to just 50%. So earlier it was 150% tariff that India imposed on American whiskey, which was reduced to just 50% right after he landed in India. So which means the number of imports that India gets from America, whether it is about chemicals and pharmaceuticals or talking about electronics or talking about steel, all these products will see a further drop in the tariffs that have been imposed by India traditionally on these American goods. There have, however, been strong, harsh reactions coming in from the industry, whether it is the steel industry or the pharma or the chemical industry, that they are unhappy that these suggestions have been proposed by the Indian government, the Indian Commerce Ministry, about its willingness to cut tariffs on more than 55% of the US imports that India receives traditionally. So that's going to be a huge move. And that, I think this negotiation, if it comes to an agreement, is going to make President Trump very happy.
Absolutely. And Megha, to bring an end to this discussion, we of course have to mention the action that's going on in Venezuela. Of course, Trump announcing 25% tariffs on anybody who buys Venezuelan oil. That of course impacts India. We've also heard China react. So what more can you tell us on that?
Well, not so much India, but more on China, and that's exactly why at the crack of dawn, the Foreign Ministry of China has come out and released a statement. It has condemned, it says it condemns the interference of United States of America and Trump administration in the internal matters of Venezuela. Remember, 68% of the oil imports of China come from Venezuela. There are other countries, including Italy and Spain and Vietnam in East Asia, that also import oil from Venezuela. But India, at one point of time, until very recently, used to import oil from Venezuela. It has stopped doing that. Remember, the increment in its oil imports, oil and gas imports, comes from the dropped prices in Russian oil after the Ukraine-Russia war began 3 years ago. And therefore, that balancing act that was done by India, keeping in mind its self-interest as well. But talking on a larger scale about the 25% tariffs that the Trump administration is looking to impose on countries that are going to trade with Venezuela and imports its oil, is going to directly hit China particularly. So strong reaction from China, but at the same time, Venezuela has also been protesting the deportation of hundreds and thousands of Venezuelans that the Trump administration and President Trump himself has called criminals and acted upon the Alien Enemies Act. So these two moves that have been made by the Trump administration are interrelated, and although there has been harsh criticism that he has had to face from the judiciary, from the leaders of the opposition in the United States of America, he seems to stand firm on this position of his. Remember, it's also interesting to note that just a few hours ago, last evening, Trump also made statements that the 2nd April tariffs that were going to be imposed, the countries that deal with Venezuela trade-wise are going to be impacted. They are going to be the ones that are going to be impacted first. He, at the same time, also mentioned that there could be a tax break that could be given to certain other countries on the announcements that he had, the warnings and threats that he had earlier given about the reciprocal U.S. tariffs, which included countries like Canada and Mexico and India and other European nations as well. So is he trying to do a balancing act over here, and why is it that he has now suddenly started to focus on Venezuela and decided to put other countries, including Mexico and Canada, on the back burner? Is something that would be interesting to analyze, because suddenly from Canada, who has been awaiting taxes from reciprocal taxes from the Trump administration, has been given some sort of a breather. Mexico had been anticipating taxes, and the date has continued to be forwarded time and again, and now it's at 2nd of April. So it will be interesting to note which are the countries who will actually have to bear the brunt of paying reciprocal taxes, tariffs to United States of America. But it looks like at this point of time, at this very moment, countries that are dealing with Venezuela and having trade with Venezuela are not going to be spared, and on top of the rung is China.
Megha Sharma, our executive editor there, thank you very much for joining us. The ongoing trade spat across the world is something we will of course keep an eye on, but that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you that and more of the latest news from across the world.